Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad-bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 1, Text 27, Translation and Commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Yatha vairanubandhena martyas tanmayatam yat natata bhakti yogena iti me nischita matihi. Translation. Narada Muni continued. By devotional service, one cannot achieve such intense absorption in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one can through enmity toward Him. That is my opinion. Purport. Shriman Narad Muni, the topmost pure devotee, praises Krishna's enemies like Shishupal because their minds are always completely absorbed in Krishna. Indeed, he thinks himself deficient in the inspiration of being feelingly absorbed in Krishna consciousness. This does not mean, however, that the enemies of Krishna are more elevated than Krishna's pure devotees. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami also thinks of himself in such a humble way. Jagai madhai hoite mui she papishta, purishe kito hoite mui se loghishta. You know this verse? You learned it? Or are you just reading it? Yeah. It's amazing. I'll give the translation. Remember who's saying this? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who obviously from his Chaitanya Charitamrita is completely, and Govinda Lilamrita, and then he had his commentary on Krishna Karnamrita also. He's totally absorbed in highest level of love of God. And he says about himself, I am a worse sinner than Jagai and Madhai, and am even lower than the worms in the stool. A pure devotee always thinks himself more deficient than everyone else. If a devotee approaches Srimati Radharani to offer some service to Krishna, even Srimati Radharani thinks that the devotee is greater than she. Thus, Narada Muni says that according to his opinion, the enemies of Krishna are better situated because they are fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and Krishna in terms of killing him, just as a very lusty man always thinks of women and their association. The essential point in this connection is that one should be fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna 24 hours a day. There are many devotees in Raga Marga, which is exhibited in Vrindavan, whether in Dasyaras, Sakyaras, Vatsalyaras, or Madhuryaras. All the devotees of Krishna are always overwhelmed by thoughts of Krishna. When Krishna is away from Vrindavan tending the cows in the forest, the gopis in the Madhurya Rasa are always absorbed in thoughts of how Krishna walks in the forest. The soles of his feet are so soft that the gopis would not dare keep his lotus feet on their soft breasts. Indeed, they consider their breasts a very hard place for the lotus feet of Krishna, yet those lotus feet wander in the forest which is full of thorny plants. The gopis are absorbed in such thoughts at home, although Krishna is away from them. Similarly, when Krishna plays with his young friends, Mother Yashoda is very much disturbed by thoughts that Krishna, because of always playing and not taking his food properly, must be getting weak. These, I'm just thinking, because they feed Krishna such a big breakfast, and Mother Yashoda, that description is there, that's, what is that, Shukta Shakadi Dali Nalito Krishmanda, what is it? Shukta Shakati Bhaji Nalato Krishman. Dali Dalna Dugda Tumbi Roti Grita. I can't remember that's all now, but it's a huge list of the main preparations. He has that for breakfast. And as soon as he goes out, Mother starts saying, oh, he must be hungry. They give him lunch box to take also. And he comes back at night and has a big feast also. And there are always fruits in the forest. But Mother Yashoda is thinking, oh, must be so hungry. And then he goes out with his cowherd boys to play. He has to go away, otherwise he can't play with his cowherd boyfriends because they're fighting. And Mother Yashoda, she can't see. They're just playing as friends. And naturally then one boy will fight and wrestle with another, but Mother Yashoda she can't see that. It's she's thinking, oh, it's so much pain for Krishna, but it's all his fun. So different kinds of fun are conflicting. Also Mother Yashoda, she doesn't have a clue about Krishna with the gopis, how they're loving each other, because it's so rasa virodha. The different kinds of loving affection, they clash with each other. So anyway, I didn't finish reading the purport. This service is indirectly praised by Narad Muni in this verse, especially for the conditioned soul. Narad Muni recommends that one somehow or other be absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, for that will save one from the dangers of material existence. Full absorption in thought of Krishna is the highest platform of Bhakti Yoga. Om Jnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Shreshtham Manamapi Shatchiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasya Gajamaruparim Natharim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Prathita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tamnatos Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yataf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is the beauty of Srimad-bhagavatam and of the pure devotees, that it is Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam. It is scientific delineation of topics concerning the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and at the same time it is the it is Nigama Kalpatara Galitam. It is Phalam. It is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, but then that knowledge that brings us to the point of rasa, of relishable, juicy taste, emotional taste. Therefore, Mohoraho Rasika Bhuvibhavaka. Always the recommendation is there to enjoy the sweet juice, the taste from the fruits of the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge in the form of Srimad-bhagavatam. Yeah, so here what's going on is, in this first chapter of the 7th canto of Bhagavatam, there is a discussion of how is it that the Supreme Lord is equal to everyone. He should be equal to everyone, right? Everyone's his son. Sarvayonishu konteya moteya sambhavantiyaha tasam brahma mahadyone aham bija pradapita. Krishna says, I am the seed-giving father of all living beings. So he should be equal to all. But it seems that he favors the devotees and disfavors the demons. That seems to be what's going on. Yudhishthira asked Narad, so Narad is explaining that, how the Supreme Lord is equal to everyone. Why does he kill Shishupal? Doesn't seem like a very nice thing to do. But then Narad says that, well, actually, I think demons like Shishupal, they're actually in a better situation. They have more intense feeling. By their hatred is stronger than even the love of the devotees. And then this impels Srila Prabhupada to say, hey, wait a minute. No, the love is stronger than the hate. Yashoda and the young gopis. Yashoda is the older. The gopis are, of course, there are different ways of dividing the gopis. But one way is the older gopis on the age group of Yashoda, who have maternal affection to Krishna. And then there are the young gopis, who are the age of Radha, a little older or younger, and they are in an attitude of loving Krishna as a young girl loves a young boy. But actually they're mooring, that's particularly for Radha, and the others are all servants of Radha. So in the middle of this abstruse, sukshamana discussion of philosophical truths concerning the Supreme Personality of Godhead, inevitably in the discussions of the pure devotees there comes a discussion of his love and the love of the devotees for him. And in this verse has come discussion of the hatred of Shishupal. He was exceptional among demons. There were so many demons at the time of Krishna. And practically from the beginning he was killing demons. Putana, Shakarta, then Aga and Baka, they're all one family. Agasura, Bakasura, Putana. What a family. Anyway, Krishna was killing so many, but Shishupal was special. Because even though and Dantavakra, we don't hear much about Dantavakra, but actually Shishupal and Dantavakra, they are Jai and Vijay, who came again as, first of all, as Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and jug ears. Kumbhakarna has ears like jugs. First the Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, then Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and then again is Shishupal and Dantavakra. So Shishupal greatly hated Krishna, and Narad Muni praises, in one sense, the intensity. Hate is a very intense emotion. We can use, at least in English, we can use the word love in a very loose way. I love chocolate. Well, I don't actually. Or maybe even if I do, I haven't tasted it for 40 years or something, unless someone slipped me some Mongolati sandesh or something. But, okay, we can say in a very loose way. I love, oops, I don't love ants biting me. So it can be used in a very loose way, but the word hate is a very strong word, isn't it? Very, very strong word. It's a very, very intense emotion. But that intensity, that is required in devotion. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusham param. That is required. That somehow or other, if we intensely worship Krishna, even out of some material desire, okay, I'll worship Krishna because I want to have some material desire fulfilled. Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udara dihi Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one is desireless, it means a devotee who is automatically serving Krishna with intensity, or has material desires. And a great example of that is Dhruva Maharaj, with very strong material desires, worship Krishna. Then Akamasam Moksha Kama, one who desires liberation. If one should worship Krishna intensely. So that intensity of love that is being indirectly praised by Narad Muni here, by seeing the example of Shishupal and others who seriously hated Krishna. It wasn't for them a hobby. It was completely absorbed. Vairanubandhena, this term is used here. Comes more than once in the Bhagavatam, comes in the previous. Vairanubandhena, Vaira, that's the enmity, and Anubandha means just tied up by it, completely absorbed in it. We hear also about Kamsa, while he was eating, while he was sleeping, while he was getting up in the morning, taking bath, always thinking of Krishna, but with an attitude of hatred, intense absorption in hatred. It seems in this material world it's easier to hate than to love. Especially in this modern age. Modern age means Kali Yoga, last 5,000 years. Well, it's modern compared to Dwapara Yoga, Treta Yoga, and Satya Yoga. Hatred, very intense emotion. People, they become ready to hate others very easily. It's almost as if they need that, or they like that. That's why the Machiavellian politics, the Machiavelli, the political theorist of medieval Italy, recommended that for the prince or the head of state, he should always have some outside enemy. Should always make some enmity with some neighboring state, and that will unify the people. Because if you don't have them unified against some outside enemy, then they're going to fight amongst each other and fight against the prince. So the idea is that people, it's almost they need an enemy. The feeling that we need to hate someone. People talk of love and people become impressed by that, but practically it seems to be easier to inspire people on the platform of hate than on the platform of love. It's easier to raise an army to go and fight the enemy, whoever the enemy may be, than to get people to sacrifice en masse for the benefit of others. So that hatred, Narad Muni in an indirect way, back to front way. Got that? Verapu. Is that something like Viparita? He is praising the intense love of the great devotees of Krishna, which we're all supposed to, here in our Krishna consciousness movement, we're supposed to be developing that, or at least in our beginning stages, we're supposed to be developing at least a desire to come to that level. It's a beginning, if we at least desire to some kind of desire to come to that level. It's not when we've been covered by egoism, sense of I, me and mine for unlimited births, just as all of a sudden cast it off and be in full intense love of Krishna. Well, it's not so likely to happen very quickly, but at least we have the desire to do that, and then engage in sadhana, becoming in contact with Krishna. Then the idea, coming in contact with Krishna by hearing and chanting about Krishna and serving Krishna and discussing Krishna, being in association with devotees of Krishna. The idea is that we become Krishna-ized, like an iron rod in a fire gradually becomes hot, 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 and it takes on the nature of the fire. Just by being immersed in that atmosphere. So that's always recommended then, that devotees take up devotional service very seriously, become intensely absorbed in bhajan, in devotional activities. Of course, Srila Prabhupada gave us so many concessions for the modern age. We should be chanting 64 rounds minimum a day, but we're given 16 to chant. We should be, today is Ekadashi, we should be fasting from midday the day before. No water, staying up all night. Fasting means no water, no food, nothing, until the next morning. And then no extra rest, no sleeping in the day, and go on with our service. That's the standard, but we're all rather pathetic compared to people of not very long ago, previously. They were physically and mentally strong enough to do this, and they had that practice from the beginning of life. So the idea then on Ekadashi, just chant, chant, chant. Absorb in devotional service. So intense bhajan, which can help one to awaken one's dormant, intense love of Krishna. Now, of course, Srila Prabhupada gave us so many concessions. Not that he was cheating us of the real thing, but that we ourselves, he was just ministering to our level. And then he gave us so many services to perform, with the idea that we can become purified. And Srila Prabhupada also gave the formula 16 plus 4 equals BTG. You can't translate that in Tamil. 16 rounds plus 4 regulated principles equals back to Godhead. BTG, back to Godhead. Bhagavad Darshanam, not exactly, but that's what they call the magazine in Tamil. Bhagavad Darshanam. The Back to Godhead magazine, yeah. So Srila Prabhupada, by his mercy, we can be delivered. But the intensity is required. Intensity of devotional service. It's easier to, it's easier to hate than to love. It seems like that for us conditioned souls. But we should not cultivate that hating feelings. It's also possible within the sphere of devotional service because in the society of devotees there are so many discrepancies. And when the discrepancies become normal or normalized, that is what is called a deviation. When what should not be allowed or done is habitually done, and everyone seems to think it's okay, then that's called a deviation. Because that will impede our advancement in devotional life. Just like here, devotees are living here. The idea is to have some peaceful rural community where devotees can all together live a devotional life. We can all help nourish each other's devotional progress. And here there's supposed to be no influence, or at least gross influence, of the materialistic way of life. So the whole International Society for Krishna Consciousness is meant for that, to make an atmosphere. The temples, the ashrams, the communities, supposed to make an atmosphere in which everyone can practice Krishna consciousness, anukulyena, Krishna anushilanam, to practice devotional service in a favorable atmosphere, and to cultivate our feelings for Krishna, so that we become ourselves more and more inclined to serve Him. But within that atmosphere, if something unfavorable enters, and is allowed to enter, then it detracts from the atmosphere. Just to give an example, I was informed recently that in Mayapur it was announced by, WhatsApp or whatever, that a tattoo artist had arrived in the community. And everyone was informed of this so that they could take advantage of the services of the tattoo artist. And one brave lady tweeted or whatever it was, saying, well, actually, this isn't very good, is it? We didn't come to Krishna consciousness for all this tattoos and things like that. There's some bodily decorations, rather low-class thing. We came to Krishna consciousness, we wanted a more elevated way of life. So it's just it's just a small thing that all of a sudden we find in the kirtan that the boys playing the mridangas have got daggers on their arms and daggers and snakes. That's a common motive, isn't it? A dagger with a snake on it, tattoo motive, imitating their counterparts in the West, kirtaniyas. So I mean, well, it's just a small thing, yeah, but it's not recommended in Shastra, it's not in tradition, and it just little thing which brings in something of bodily consciousness. Let me decorate my body. Of course, decoration of the body is also allowed there in Vedic culture, especially for grihastas. But then there's a Vedic way of doing that also. The best decoration for the body is tilak. That's a spiritual decoration. But then grihastas, they may dress nicely. Nice dhotis, saris, on occasion, and they may have jewelry and so many things. So there's a way of doing all these things which is in line with the culture that Krishna has given us, Krishna's Vedic culture. Now, so that's might be called a relatively small example, but maybe it's not so small either, because after all, in Mayapur, it's the land of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so many people come, and they're surrounded by so many Gauriya Maths, and then the Navadvip Gosais, Goswamis, and Babajis, and and it's going to become a laughing stock, or worse still, that people, they come to ISKCON and think, oh, this is the biggest and best. So this is the way to be a Vaishnava. You can't be a proper Vaishnava unless you have a dagger with a snake tattooed on your shoulder. That may come. That may happen. We start to pollute the whole culture of the Sampradaya. So that's just one example. And There may be so many examples of how Krishna consciousness has been brought to the world, supposed to show a better way of life, and there may be so many deviations by individuals or by groups in so many ways. And what do? Point that out. You can point that out. And what will happen? Nothing. Usually. Nothing. Or just the thing goes on. So it just goes on because we love everyone. And we unconditionally love everyone, and that means we don't... People are setting a bad example, we don't say anything because we unconditionally love. Something like that. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do? Then we should get very angry, probably. Why are they bringing all these things? Like, for instance, one very gross example of something which is a very severe deviation is if a sannyasi has a female traveling assistant, who, pretty young girl who travels with him everywhere. Now that's clearly outside the scope of sannyas, and there's no point to take sannyas. If someone wants to travel all over the world with a pretty young woman and he marries her, and well, okay, that's one thing. But a sannyasi is, what's the meaning of sannyas? I mean, the first thing you think about when you think of sannyasi, is that it's not supposed to have not be closely associated with females. At least, I mean, of course, sannyasi doesn't hate females. It's not supposed to hate anyone. But in terms of social behavior, there has to be a distance. Sannyas is supposed to set an example. So if that does go on in our society, and it does go on, then it's not surprising if someone becomes very disturbed by that and may even make a case about it, and it shouldn't go on. But it goes on. So what do? Scream and yell. And what happens? Nothing. It just goes on. Because we love everyone. And we don't want to say anything bad about anyone. Okay, that's one thing. And then there are so many things. Now, in a movement, our movement, we can expect that there will be discrepancies. Now, I'm using these words here, discrepancies and deviation. And there's a difference between the two, because discrepancy means a departure from the norm, an unwanted or improper departure from the norm. And a deviation means when the departure from the norm becomes the norm. It becomes normal and accepted. So there's a difference. So discrepancies will always be there, but deviations should not be allowed. But somehow or other, they're being allowed, which means the whole devotional society is being undermined. So much so that you told me that one temple president in Europe had said that when people newly become interested in devotional service, he doesn't recommend them to come to the temple. Because if they come to the temple, then they'll get such a bad impression that their enthusiasm to take up Krishna consciousness will go down. But the temples are supposed to be where people come and they see an example of pure devotional service. And even many years ago, a devotee in America, actually it's Vijay, the book distribution minister or something, told me, they said there's only one or two temples in the whole of America where I would advise anyone, if anyone takes an interest, there are only one or two temples in America where I would advise them to go. So that's a very serious situation, isn't it? It means there's something seriously wrong with our movement. in many parts of the world. What do you do? Well, you could make a stink about it. Now, what's this got to do with all this, what I'm talking about? Well, talking about the attitude of sustained, intense hatred, intense. Now, I'm just thinking there's one devotee, whatever. He's been practically daily on the internet for maybe 20, 25 years and just blasting all the faults in ISKCON. And a lot of the stuff he says is true. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff he says is also not true, exaggerated, from a skewed perspective. But he, and there may be others like him also, they seem to live on the hate or the negativity. They may actually be almost pleased when they get a report of something gone wrong, because that gives more fuel for the bhav that they are cultivating. That they have become the voice of righteousness. And that's what they are cultivating. Now I'm just thinking that, what is that? Sajjana gunam icchanti pamar... no, what is it? Yeah, dosham icchanti pamaraha. Srila Prabhupada used to quote that the saintly persons, they like to see good qualities, and sinful people, they like to see faults. Now, that doesn't mean we should be completely blind to faults, but at the same time, we shouldn't be desirous of finding faults. Just like Shishupal was desirous of finding faults with Krishna. And he did. How can you find faults with Krishna? Well, Shishupal did. We don't even know who this person is. He started off as some cowherd boy, and then all of a sudden he's standing up here like he's some kind of king. What caste does he belong to? He doesn't have any caste. So to say in Vedic culture, say someone doesn't have any caste, that's a very great condemnation. Even now we have in India the, what is it, OBCs and the backward castes, other backward castes. They're considered very low if someone has no caste. Shudra is low. It's called someone a Shudra as an insult. Prabhupada often used to call his disciples. Vaishya is higher, Kshatriya is higher, Brahmana is higher, and Shudra is very low. But then below the Shudra, really low. So to say someone is, because Shudra at least is a caste. So if we say someone has no caste, that's a great insult. So Shishupal saw that in Krishna. You see, how can you start off as a cowherd or a Vaishya, then all of a sudden you become a Kshatriya? That just means he has no fixed caste. So he's insulting Krishna. Of course, it was true, but it's actually praise, because Krishna has no caste. Not that he's below, he's above all castes. And he appears as a cowherd boy to enjoy pastimes with his loving devotees in Vrindavan, and he appears as a Kshatriya boy in Mathura, and then as a prince in Dwaraka to please his devotees. So, but Shishupal was finding fault. Even one of Srila Prabhupada, not his godbrothers, but someone in the Gaudiya Math long ago, in Madras as it was called at that time, he was criticizing Prabhupada. Said that, well, if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted Krishna consciousness spread all over the world, he would have done it himself. So what is this Bhaktivedanta Swami? He was criticizing. It's ridiculous. He's criticizing him for preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. So Srila Prabhupada, when he heard this, he said that, well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't do it personally because he wanted to give the credit to me. So it is possible to find fault anywhere, and genuine faults require to be pointed out. But at the same time, if one has an attitude of deliberately looking for faults, that is not Vaishnava. And one should be somewhat generous also to try to, not to presume someone is faulty or they're wrong and then just blame them. Maybe I'm getting a little bit wise, maybe, but nowadays if someone comes to me and gives some bad report about them, I don't necessarily accept it, because usually there's always another side to the story. So, or they may say this is bad, and you say, well, maybe there's a good side also. Or maybe it's all just bad. That may be there also. But the thing is, it's not wise to make a judgment about people without considering. That's why they have court cases, and the judge, he considers, judges, after hearing all the different sides. Anyway, those who get into this, just only seeing the faults and looking for the bad things, they may in one sense be doing a service by warning devotees to maybe not associate with those who are actually grossly deviated. But at the same time, if that feeling becomes so intense that they're always looking for the fault and seeing the bad, that can be then like Shishupal, who's being praised in one sense, but it's a back to front kind of praise. And Shishupal did get liberated, and because he happened to originally be one of the associates of the Lord in Vaikuntha, then he went back to Vaikuntha, because he was always thinking of Krishna. But not necessarily that everyone gets that by being intensely absorbed in fault-finding attitude. Now, I was just thinking that if they have they're so much dedicated that for more than 20 years they're writing daily so many, very heavy things, and using all the heaviest, strongest adjectives, denouncing devotees or people they consider to be not actually devotees. That intensity. Now, if they had that intensity in bhajan, then they'd be a very advanced devotee. I don't know what they think of when they wake up in the morning. What are they thinking? That now I've got to find out some more bad news to broadcast. What are they thinking of? It's easier to hate than love, it seems, in this world. As Madhyamadhikaris, we're supposed to see with one good eye and one bad eye. You should see the good side, but we shouldn't be naive to the bad side either. If we see all good and don't see the bad and just say everything's good when it's not, then everything becomes degraded. And if we see all bad, then no one becomes inspired to be good. If we think that everything's all bad, then where's the inspiration to progress? If everyone's simply deviated and off the wall. So, intensity. It's easier to be intense. Of course, it may be easy also just to relax and have nothing to do with any of this. Just forget it. I'll just sit at home and chant Hare Krishna. That's also, you can do. Forget all this looking, seeing faults, this, I'll just sit at home and chant Hare Krishna. But if devotees could have that intense application to devotional service, let me eat less, sleep less, chant more, serve more, or Srila Prabhupada engaged us in intense activities, in preaching, marathons, go out, distribute more books, intense absorption in distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. And that becomes very powerful for spiritual advancement. And ultimately, that is going to help us. Bhavoshada, the medicine for material existence, is hearing about Krishna, which is Shrotra, Mano, Abhirama. It's very pleasing to hear about. And actually, if someone is practicing Krishna consciousness, hearing, chanting, applying themselves in devotional service very powerfully, very strongly, very intensely, then if they point out something, some discrepancy, which should be rectified, or some deviation that should be rectified, and people are likely to take it very seriously if they can see the person's very strong in devotional service. Otherwise, it can be that someone's they're intensely applying themselves, that they've taken upon themselves what they consider to be the service of pointing out faults for the benefit of all, reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. But it can become mixed up with one's own egoism also. That's true of anything. Even chanting many rounds can become mixed up with one's egoism. That I'm chanting so many rounds, just see, I'm so much better than everyone else. So that is possible in any area of devotional service. But in pointing out faults or that need to be rectified in Vaishnava society, then one should, it's best done by those who are intensely themselves absorbed in devotional service, who are intensely absorbed in bhajan. Then people are more likely to take it seriously. And that point that if they do engage in intense devotional service, or by hearing, chanting lots of rounds, very seriously trying to absorb themselves in thoughts of Krishna, studying Bhagavatam, then that will be very powerful for their spiritual advancement. And that will ultimately uplift the Vaishnava society. It's not all done by rules and regulations and meetings and what is that Srila Prabhupada said? Instead of meetings, resolutions, revolutions and no solutions, better to chant Hare Krishna. Now that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that the discrepancies and deviations shouldn't be pointed out. But at the same time, we have to keep our focus. So it's not like some, we're not like some political party where within the party there's all infighting to see who can show what's the best, who can be the best leader, this, that, and the newspapers, they're always trying to expose the politicians. I think they gave up because the politicians became so shameless. Well, they still look exposed, but anyway, the politicians don't care at all. corruption, hypocrisy, and you can't be a politician unless you speak with a forked tongue. So, what is our focus? If we become, I myself have, in my infamous life, pointed out various discrepancies and deviations in a public way, and it's not that I've given up on that, but at the same time, we always have to remember that at the time of death, we have to remember Krishna with loving attitude, and to facilitate that, we have to cultivate that throughout this life. Loving feelings for Krishna. That's why chanting, studying Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita is now available in Tamil. Of course, Bhagavad Gita, all these books, just a book. It's a book. It's a book. So there's so many books, and in reading books we can absorb our minds in so many different topics. But these books, although they are made of paper with ink, like any book, that's what books are. Nowadays there are e-books, but basically, traditionally, books for the last few hundred years have meant paper and ink. So what do we find in here? All spiritual. They're completely different from topics of the material world. Maybe condemning the situation of the material world. I just opened the book here at one well-known verse, well-known to us because Srila Prabhupada often quoted it. Yan maithunadi grihamedhi sukham hitucham kandu yanena karaya iva dukkha dukkam tripyanti neha kripana bahudukha bhaja kandutivam manasijang vishaheta dhiraha. Prahlad Maharaja's instructions. Sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. Grihamedhis, so-called grihastas, who have no spiritual knowledge, think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually it is a source of distress. The kripanas, the fools who are just the opposite of brahmanas, are not satisfied by repeated sensuous enjoyment. Those who are dhira, however, who are sober and who tolerate this itching, are not subjected to the sufferings of fools and rascals. That's pretty heavy condemnation, isn't it? Fault finding? No, it's not fault finding, because it's meant to lift people by distinguishing what is right from what is wrong. It is meant for lifting people to the higher consciousness, Krishna consciousness, love of Krishna. So these books are spiritual knowledge, spiritual bliss, Golokera Prema Dhan, Harinama Sankirtan. The chanting of the holy names is imported from the spiritual world. Ratina Jan Milo Kenetai, Narotanda says, why didn't I get a taste for that? What's wrong with me? So let us become absorbed intensely in love of Krishna. Step by step. Shanai Shanai Uparamad. Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya. Step by step. Gradually, with intelligence
சிறுக சிறுக
and determination,
முழுக்க
we should become purified. Hare Krishna.
82 யாருக்காவது கேள்வி இருக்கா? So he is asking, he has an observation. He was in Kerala.
You're in Kerala with the Padayatra.
So during that time there was a Namahatta center which was being managed by one Mataji leader. So the Mataji leader used to drive around in her car. So one sannyasi, so she used to drive that sannyasi around in the car.
In Kerala, one lady devotee used to drive around a sannyasi in her car. Yeah, not proper, huh? Not proper. But if it goes on day after day and people come to think it's proper, it's okay. And then the whole meaning of sannyas is lost. And the whole principle of careful and restricted dealings between men and women, that's also lost. And then it's very difficult to advance in Krishna consciousness. So that's a fact. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. From my side, I'm writing books, pointing out all these things, pointing out what is the proper standard, and trying to set up some communities where we can have a little sanity in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, all men, women mixing up, it's insane, it's crazy. There's no question of proper spiritual advancement in such a situation.
So he's saying that here mostly the labor who come to work, they are women.
The women are working, yeah.
Yeah. So he says, being brahmachari, he has
Yeah. The farm communities are actually meant for grihastas more. It's not that brahmacharis can't. Well, of course, there are so many ashrams in India where they have a goshala. So generally, any ashram will have a goshala. Maybe Mayavadi or whatever. But then the men, the brahmacharis, they do all the work. They don't bring in labor from outside. If they bring labor, some mystery or something, it'll be a man. It's not an ideal situation. Very difficult to get an ideal situation in the modern age. One thing, those women who work, they work very sincerely, don't they? If you give them the work to do, you don't have to be there at every moment. They work very hard. Tivramana, intensely, yeah. Same word. But that's not the point of your question, that you shouldn't be dealing like that. The men won't come to work. They get money. They still get money from the government for not working. That system's still going on in Tamil Nadu. That crazy system. They give them money for not working. Then they don't work. And it pushes up the price of the labor. And it's insane policies just to get votes. Mad. Completely mad policies.
ரொம்ப தவறான இந்த மாதிரி அரசியல்வாதம் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காங்க. வேலை செய்யலைனாலும் அதுக்கு வந்து காசு கொடுக்குறாங்க அரசியல்வாதி.
Anyway, as you may know, this project is it's in a protracted state of flux.
இந்த ப்ராஜெக்ட் வந்து ஒரு எங்கேயும் போகாத ஒரு நிலைமையில இருக்கு.
It's not going on as expected in the beginning.
எப்படி நான் நினைச்சேனோ அப்படி போல.
That it's going on is
ஆனா ஏதோ நடந்துட்டு இருக்கு.
largely thanks to you.
ஏதோ போயிட்டு இருக்குன்னா உங்களால தான் போயிட்டு இருக்கு.
That it's still going on. Same thing in Telangana. There was Narayan Srinivas. He just stayed there through all difficult times. And now it's come up very nicely. The farm we have in Telangana, we went through a very tough period, but Narayan Srinivas Prabhu stuck it out, and now it's developing very nicely. In some ways, I mean, of course, there's so many discrepancies also, and there always will be, because that's the nature of the material world. At least the direction has to be clear. Maybe that's the difference between discrepancies and deviations. If there are discrepancies, there are things going wrong, but at least we know where we're supposed to be headed. But with deviations, we just lose the proper focus altogether. Anything else? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Okay then, Hare Krishna. All glories to His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada.